Welcome to our 5 on 5. Please be welcomed again by Congressman Cliff Bentz. Excuse me. Good to see you, sir.
Yeah, great to be here.
Thank you for coming. So you're urging the U.S. Supreme Court to look at a president's authority to create national monuments on public land, something they can do right now without congressional approval. What concerns you most about this?
Well, the big challenge for the president's actions is how in the world do we continue to do what Congress said we could do on ONC lands, which is conduct logging operations, multiple use, and the president's decided that he has the power to somehow tell Congress what we can and can't do on that land, and frankly, he doesn't have that authority. So the amicus brief I'm leading asks the Supreme Court to say, look, Mr. President, you can't do this. You can't step on Congress's authority by trying to make a monument where ONC land had already been dedicated to multiple use.
Okay, so this isn't about any particular president and their actions. It's about ONC specifically?
It's about the power of a president to do what the president wants to do and stomp on Congress's authority. We can't allow a president to do that. And it just happens that he's damaging land right here in my district.
Okay. You endorsed former President Trump last week. How'd you come to that decision?
So I had looked carefully at the candidates, and I asked myself who is best suited to help us when it comes to fire, water, and the rights of people in rural areas, and it was obvious that it would be President Trump. And to make sure I was right, I reached out to former Secretaries of the Interior Zinke, who's now in Congress, asked him what he thought. He is totally supportive of former President Trump. And same with David Bernhardt, the former Secretary of the Interior. Spent an hour on the phone with him just before Christmas saying, hey, if President Trump is reelected, then will he do a good job for the Northwest? The answer was an unequivocal yes. And so I also think that he will win, and I want to be on the winning side.
I'm sure you're aware that several of his former cabinet members have said they would not support him, including former Secretary of State and CIA Director Mike Pompeo and one of his own former chiefs of staff, General John Kelly. Did you speak with any of them, or did you stay with the Northwest contacts?
Actually, I have spoken with not John Kelly. I've never met the man, but I have met Secretary of State Pompeo, and I would suggest that he was supportive actually of President Trump when I spoke with him a year ago. So I'm a little surprised at what you're telling me about the Secretary of State Pompeo.
The former president wrote on social media last week about January 6th, quote, even events that, subquote, cross the line, end subquote, must fall under total immunity or it will be years of trauma trying to determine good from bad, end quote. Now, to my knowledge, he's the only former president in the country's history to proclaim that he needs immunity for actions in office. How concerning is that to you?
Well, it's an issue that has to be addressed by the Supreme Court. And so maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. He's certainly in a position where he wants immunity. I don't blame him for asking for it. He's been accused of all kinds of things, and immunity would answer a lot of those questions. But on the other hand, that issue is up to the Supreme Court. I anticipate it will rule one way or the other, and then we'll know.
You're on the, you're on the House Judiciary Committee.
I am.
Last month, the GOP-led House authorized an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. Representative Jim Jordan, who chairs that committee, told Fox News this month that the most damning evidence that they have so far came from Devin Archer, Hunter Biden's business partner. NBC News reports that GOP investigators released a transcript of Archer's testimony that shows Archer testified the president wasn't involved with Burisma, didn't talk business with his son's associates, and didn't take bribes. What evidence is there?
Well, I would suggest that Mr. Archer, is biased. I did not attend the depositions of Mr. Archer. Of course, I've looked carefully at much of the material that's been prepared as a result of his testimony. I would suggest he's glossing over the airplane flights where Hunter Biden was asked to, or maybe invited himself to join the then Vice President on Air Force 2 as they flew toward Ukraine. And it's hard for me to know how a person, Hunter Biden, makes a living selling influence if he's not pointing at the influence he has on his father. Who else did he have to say he was selling influence for or toward? I mean, come on. And so the real issue, though, is what exactly do we have when it comes to evidence President Biden receiving bribes, and we're working on that. Not the Judiciary Committee is not the one doing that. It's actually the Oversight Committee that's working on much of what's going on in that space. And then we together will be going through it to determine exactly who's going to handle the possible impeachment.
It may be oversight, it may be judiciary.
Maybe both.
Want him for, or both. Yeah. Want him for a closed door testimony, but so, he says, I'm willing to talk openly.
Oh, Hunter
what's
Biden.
Hunter Biden. What's the difference for the public watching at home? Why can't we agree?
Yeah, so happy you asked. So as an attorney, I've taken dozens, if not hundreds, of depositions. And the last thing you want to be doing is arguing about a deposition in a committee. That's not going to work. What you do is you take the deposition in a normal deposition proceeding with their lawyer sitting by them, so he can take the fifth whenever he wants to, and also so you can have appropriate exhibits and not have a circus being created by the Democrats on the other side, because that's exactly what they would do. And so the proper thing is have it, just like you do any other deposition, carefully managed, and then you go ahead with the public hearing.
Okay, we've covered a lot. We've got a little bit more to do. Please. We'll have much more with Congressman in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to our 5 on 5. Again, we're here with Southern Oregon Congressman Cliff Bentz. Congressman, you were one of just 8 House Republicans to join Democrats in rejecting an impeachment inquiry into Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas over his handling of the border. Why?
Well, it wasn't an impeachment inquiry. It was actually articles of impeachment brought by Marjorie Taylor Greene that were incomplete, poorly crafted, and would have been laughed out of the Senate. And so what the 8 of us did, and by the way, 5 of the 8 are chairs of committees, and 3 of us out of the 8 are on judiciary. And what we did is voted with the Democrats to send the matter back to committee, the very committee on which Marjorie Taylor Greene sits. And Marjorie decided to kind of jump the gun and bring her own set of articles, incomplete, and without proper recitation of the crimes that the Secretary has committed, to the floor. And thus, when the motion was made to move it back to committee so it could be repaired, we supported it. Most people get confused and think that it was something having to do with the inquiry. It did not. It had everything to do with making sure we get the impeachment right. It will be voted on and out of committee on the next week, on the 30th. It'll come to the floor, and I anticipate that I will vote for it. I have not yet seen the exact crimes called out in it.
Okay, Tuesday, they're coming up. So today, Republican Senator Mitt Romney said that former President Trump told GOP lawmakers not to negotiate any sort of compromise bill with President Biden that could alleviate immigration issues at the U.S.-Mexico border, presumably because it's 2024, an election issue. This Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell has acknowledged it. Romney called it tragic. Romney called it appalling. GOP Senator Todd Young called it tragic. What do you call it? Politics?
Well, I call it not surprising that Senator Romney would attack President Trump. They're certainly not friends. What I would suggest is that the proper approach in managing the House's position on the border is to understand what has been negotiated by the Senate. And what's appalling is what the Senate has negotiated. What they did, believe it or not, as I've understood it, haven't seen it in writing yet, but they said that instead of the 7,000 or 8,000 people coming across the border a day, they would agree, the Democrats, to a lid of 5,000 people a day. Well, that's about 150,000 people a month. President Trump knows that we're never going to agree with that. That has very little to do with the election and everything to do with trying to secure our border. And so what he knew, I'm sure that President Trump knows, is that which has been created by the so-called negotiations between Democrats and one Republican in the Senate is inadequate to secure the border, and he's basically saying the House is never going to go along with it. I wouldn't go along with it.
A lot to cover. 2024.
Yeah,
Good to see you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Stay with us. We'll be right back.